Hey friends, it's March 17th, 2025, and we're over 3 years into Russia's invasion into Ukraine. In fact, our friends Vladimir and Lilia were sharing how 3 years ago today, they were actively involved in evacuating people out of Mariupol. It's amazing how quickly we forget the horrors of Mariupol, the horrors of Bucha, the horrors of Gostomel. But these are just the tip of the iceberg, and it's important for us to remember because they're still going on in the Russian-occupied territories. There are still tens of thousands of Ukrainian children who have been taken hostage. They have been kidnapped and taken to Russia, and it matters, and you guys care, and that means so much to us. Thank you for continuing to pray from a place of hope, continuing to share, comment, like. It's wonderful. Thank you. But here we are on the 17th, and there's some very key things to pray about. As I shared, Trump's team put a demand to Russia, to the Kremlin, to come up with a response. What were they asking? They were asking them to, first of all, they were saying, we need you to come to a table for a ceasefire. And Russia said, what is the outline of this ceasefire you're talking about? Now you gotta understand, ceasefire, this isn't a playground fight where, you go to that side, you go to that side. In order for there to be a real ceasefire, there has to be actual practical considerations. What qualifies as no military action? Well, is it a certain number of kilometers from the front lines? Is it what qualifies as no military action? What qualifies and what happens if someone breaks a ceasefire? What are the consequences? These are very key elements to understand. And who is going to oversee the ceasefire? Who's going to verify that each side is keeping their part of the ceasefire? The Trump administration did not provide any of these details, and so Russia was asking what those are. And Trump's administration came back to them and said, simply, tell us. The Russians were kind of surprised, but they said, okay. So late last night, they submitted to the Trump administration their outline for what would qualify as a ceasefire they would find acceptable. Now, you can imagine those demands are not going to be realistic. They are not going to be helpful. They're going to be contradictory. And in fact, we've gotten a sign of one of them, which is that they want to get all of Ukraine out of Kursk, and then they want to set up a buffer zone, which means they want to be given control over a certain portion of Ukraine. That's what they're pushing for, that they would control to keep Russia safe from attacks from Ukraine. Needless to say, that is not a meaningful negotiation. That's not going to happen. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other things about that. Now, this is where I've been saying it's very important, because Trump's administration has indicated what they'll do is they're going to take the demands of the Russians, which they feel they've gotten as good as they can from the Russians, and try to shove it down the throats of the Ukrainians. Well, the Ukrainians are not going to accept that, nor is Europe. And so one of the things to continue to pray is that the Ukrainians and the Europeans continue to stand against this kind of peace, which is a peace. One of the things the Russians are demanding is that during this peace, that there no more military supplies come to Ukraine. All the whole time, while Russians are recruiting more people, are gathering more materials. So while Russia's getting stronger, Ukraine's getting weaker. That's not realistic. But again, the pressure is going to be intense on Ukraine. And so please continue to pray that they stand. But one of the signs that Europe is going to continue to stand is we're seeing that Merz has successfully, it looks like, pushed through a $500 million budget that has huge support for Ukraine. I mean, $500 billion. Huge support for rearmament by partnering with the Green parties. And so that is awesome. There's also one of the huge things, and this might not seem like a big thing, but France has an E-3 plane, which they use for electronic warfare. They use for intelligence gathering. It's been seen over the Black Sea. Why is that important? Because what France has offered to do when the United States quit sharing intelligence was to step into the gap. And as soon as they stepped into the gap, guess what? Trump's administration is like, oh, okay, never mind, you can have intelligence back. Because what they realized is every time Europe steps into the gap, Europe becomes more important, Europe becomes more powerful, Europe becomes more unified, and this means they become more powerful and less likely to be pushed around by the United States. Trump's administration does not like that at all. In fact, what they're wanting to do is divide up Europe. And so at the same time, they're trying to split Russia off from China. So one of the things we said over and over again, and our firm belief is this war will not end as long as the parties in power in the Kremlin remain there. The party of Chomazov, the oligarchs, and the party of the KGB types, Patrushev and others. And because they are essentially criminal elements, and they do not have the good of Russia or anybody else in mind, for that matter. And so, but they're not going to give up power just because, right? The pressures have to mount. Well, the pressure that Trump's administration is putting on them is one, but one of the demands that Trump's administration is putting on the Kremlin is to split away from China's influence and to give a mineral deal to Trump's administration, kind of like what they wanted from Ukraine. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, Putin, at the end of 2022, I believe in December, actually had already signed a mineral deal and a resource deal with China. And China wants Siberia. China wants the resource, the lumber, the water, and the minerals of Siberia. Well, China has now been putting pressure on and said, hey, we want to be written in on every one of your secret communications with the White House. You see the problem? The pressures are mounting heavily from the other side. Now, you got to understand, China is going through its own restructuring, as we just found out the second in charge, Hui Huidong, who was Xi Jinping's right-hand man and kind of his eyes and ears on the military, has just been arrested. This is a major blow to Xi Jinping's power and a sign that he has lost control of the military, and that Zhang Weizhou, I can never get that pronunciation right, is now of the Chinese military and the state. What does this mean? Well, Zhang has shown signs that he is extremely hawkish on Taiwan, and that perhaps Xi Jinping has not been as active in moving against Taiwan, but also he's very hawkish at moving against against Russia. So now you're seeing the amount of pressure that's coming on the Kremlin from Trump, from China, and the signs that the Ukraine is not going to budge, even while Russia's economy is going over a cliff. I've mentioned this before, as the parties in power are beginning to actually cleanse themselves of lower ranking members in those two groups of the oligarchs and the security types, because there's not enough money to go around to keep everybody happy. So this pressure, we're praying that this pressure continues to grow, that the Ukraine doesn't budge, and that the pressure keeps being applied by the U.S. and by China, and so that it creates a third option. And this is why we've been praying for Daniels to arise. We're praying for Daniels to arise in the midst, so that the United States will seek a party of sanity, and there can be a total end to this war, and that again, not peace in the absence of conflict, but truly peace would come into the land. But guys, you got to hear me. This is so important. Right now, there's such despair in Ukraine because of feeling so abandoned by the United States, and not just abandoned, but actually kind of the being blamed for this. It's just they feel so betrayed. Now, guys, hear me on this. Our hope is not in horses and chariots. Our hope is in the Lord. Listen, you know what? Despair is a sign that we've been trusting in the wrong things. Our trust is not in Trump. Our trust is not in China. Our trust is not in Biden. Our trust is not in Russia. Our trust is not in Zelensky. Our trust is in the Lord, that he loves people, that he's for people. And if you're experiencing despair right now, simply ask God, what have I been trusting in other than you? And God, I want to re-up my trust in you. I want to trust you. But pray for the Ukrainian church. They're struggling. There is a real measure of despair and betrayal and anger and unforgiveness that rises up, that rage that rises up. Pray for the church in Ukraine to be able to rise up, to forgive, to be able to place their trust in the Lord, but also to be re-energized for the calling that God has to bring life and health and wholeness into this broken place. Now, one of the things to be praying for, we didn't know about this, we mentioned before, but tens of thousands of Ukrainian children were kidnapped by the Russian government and taken to Russia. Well, guess what? There are organizations working to get those kids back. And Elon Musk has just canceled the funding for that program. Guys, pray for creative groups like this who are going to be able to get those children back. God has resources. God has ways. He wants to give wisdom and insight to people of ways that they can fight against this tyranny, fight against the brokenness. Pray for the Russian churches have been partnering with these organizations to try to locate these children and get them back. Also, guys, pray for the underground church in the Russian occupied areas. Pray for them. Pray that the gospel go up. Guys, this is not a worse time than during the Emperor Diocletian in the 3rd century or during Nero in the 1st century when there was such brutality. Guys, nothing is new under the sun, but God is still God, and we're just believing for God to do something truly amazing in this hour. If you have wisdom, you have insight, you have maybe a prayer focus, or you know of God doing incredible things in the middle of this, would you put that in the comments that we can celebrate with you, we can be encouraged, we can pray. But thank you guys for caring. Thank you for praying. Thank you for sharing, for liking, for following. It's making a difference. But also, if you would consider giving, our friends Vladimir and Lilia, they continue after more than 3 years to serve, even as so much has been going on. They were serving so sacrificially. But they have very little to give away in terms of support for people who are desperately in need because the resource has just dried up. Would you consider giving? If you're interested in helping, go to ariselife.org/help Ukraine. Now, I will say it again. They're not the only organization out there. There's many amazing organizations. Please, I've mentioned before our friends John and Tanya in Ivano-Frankivsk and their ministry there in Kharkov. Guys, there's so many ways you can serve and you can bless. But guys, let's not be passive in this season. But let's lean in and see God do something incredible together. Love you guys.